Hey there, it is Tuesday, which means it's time for another in real life video. This week, we are doing not a viewer submitted question, as you may think from the title and all of that. Truth be told, it is just, it may as well be a viewer submitted question. It's a question that I'm asked every so often with some degree of frequency, so I figure, hey, that sounds like it'd make for the perfect sort of in real life video. So, as I've mentioned before, anytime someone asks me a question, it really helps if, like a frequently asked question, really helps if there's already a pre-existing in real life video, if they want like a more in-depth sort of explainer or just more detail on it. Anyway, this week we're going into sort of the background on oh my gosh, I don't know if you can hear the love dog over there just really snoring up an absolute storm. Oh my god, is incredibly loud. She's just laying there. She was watching me. Anyway, sorry. Got completely sidetracked. This week, we're talking about sort of the origin and beginning of my username, my screen name that I have used for decades, going on decades, if not decades now, right? At least one decade, going on two. Anyway, I suppose it bears mentioning, Lyle Shnub is not my real name at all. If you follow me on Twitter or Instagram, to like see either just like my nonsense stream of consciousness or various fit pics respectively, you'll know that I have a completely different first name, right? It is not Lyle Shnub whatsoever. That is an entirely made up name. At the time when I was making it up, I didn't actually know that it was, in fact, kind of a real name, right? The surname, Shnub, seems like it could very obviously be just made up. But the first name, Lyle, I had no idea at the time when I had first devised it, that it was actually, like, legitimately a name. There's even at least one other fairly, I would even hesitate to say fairly, but significantly popular creator on YouTube who uses the name Lyle. He seems alright, right? Very much into animation, right? He seems alright. Hopefully he's cool. He seems cool, right? He's cool, right? Don't get me. But nonetheless, at the time, before I even knew of that person, before then, there was Lyle Lovett, the sort of American, I think, folk singer, country singer. I'm not as familiar, I'm sorry. But that guy definitely existed. This was, of course, like I said, decades ago. I think I was 11 or 12 when I came up with the name. Which is wild to say. It's almost as if like I've reinvented the name, right? To say that I came up with it. But I sort of worked my way into rediscovering the name Lyle, as it were. But yeah, I was 11 or 12 in my sort of preteen, tween sorts of years. I was, although I don't know the exact age, I know for certain I was in 6th grade at the time. I was in middle school. And I was looking at, I was playing a game, and that game was none other than, I believe, the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, Game of the Year edition, in fact. It wouldn't have been a launch edition, it would have been Game of the Year edition that I was playing on Xbox. Folks who have followed the channel for a while now probably have seen me explain this origin story and know it. And I even did a whole sort of 10 years of Morrowind video way back when, before the channel really blew up. Just kind of did it for fun. We'll cover more of that in future in real life videos because there's some other interesting stuff in there, right? But yeah, suffice to say, this happened in middle school. I was trying to come up with, of course, a character name for this game. I didn't know any of the sort of naming schemes that they used in Morrowind, right? I didn't know that not always, but typically, if your character is Imperial, you have a very Roman-sounding name, right? If your character is Dunmer, you have a name that sounds very, I don't know, Dunmary, right? But, of course, I didn't know any of that. It was my first time going into the game. It wasn't the first name that I had used, I don't believe. I don't know what was. But, alas, at the time, in middle school, I had a friend named Kyle, right? I was pretty good friends. I don't know if I would go so far as to say a best friend. Maybe, sure, why not? Why not, right? Why not a best friend? But I was good friends with someone named Kyle, and I, for whatever reason, when I was sitting there on my original Xbox back in the day, trying to get through character creation in Morrowind, for my Argonian, right? My Argonian, that was my very first sort of run through Morrowind. Their experience with it was playing an Argonian. I was thinking, man, what's a name that I could use? Well, I like this person's name. So I was like, well, I'll take that, but I want to put my own spin on it. So I think I started, maybe very literally, I took out a pen and paper and I wrote down the name Kyle, which is ironic because, not too long ago, I don't think many people do it now, but, many people will look on the name Kyle somewhat mockingly, right? But at the time, I thought it was hot shit, right? Either way, I sort of looked for letters I could replace at the beginning of that, and I kept going through and replacing various letters, 1 letter, 2 letters, right? And eventually I settled on Lyle. I thought, man, that sounds like it could be a real name. And as it turns out, it 100% was. So also I wanted to have a surname because I noticed, yeah, in fact, you know what? This is probably evidence enough that this was not my first time playing Morrowind, because I knew that a lot of other characters, not all of them, but a lot of other characters in Morrowind had a last name. So I thought, well, my character needs a last name too. So at the time, we had this bush, not necessarily a shrub, right? If you see where I'm going here, but we had this bush sort of outside of our house that was always such a pain in the butt for me to push our lawnmower around. And I believe it was like spring or summer. It was very hot out. So it was definitely at the forefront of my mind. Also at the forefront of my mind was a certain unscrupulous side character in Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Off the top of my head, I think his name, he was like a corrupt politician. I believe his name was Alex Shrub, right? And I didn't really, at the time, I was playing Vice City, you know, I didn't really know what was going on in the game. I was a child, right? I was a preteen child playing through the game. Probably half of my time with the game was spent putting in cheat codes, right? And just kind of driving around and having tanks and stuff like that. But I had gotten in far enough to where I knew of Alex Shrub, who would be on the radio a lot. Radio broadcasters in the game would talk about this guy and sort of how he was having like extramarital affairs with some, I think she was a porn star, right? In the game itself. She had like enormous tits, but that was like her entire character, right? She was just the porn star titty woman. And this corrupt politician, Alex Shrub, was all about those titties. And 11 to 12 or maybe even 10-year-old me said, man, maybe I'm about that too. No, I don't know. I think it was just because his name was on my mind, and the shrub, right? But nonetheless, I took a similar approach there. I saw the last name Shrub. I was like, man, let's spice this up. Let's get this a little interesting, right? I can't just be Shrub. That's a real word, right? We gotta make it like Morrowind, you know, where people got weird names, where there's big bugs and guars and people who are racist. I had to get all that going real great. So, once again, I started replacing words in there until I arrived at something that felt about right. So I landed on Shnub. I just replaced the R with an N, right? And that was the end of it. I know a lot of folks will commonly misspell, not Lyle, but Shnub, and put in a C in there. They'll spell it out with the letter C. So I think it'll be like, it'll have a far more Germanic vibe to it, which, I don't know, fair enough. I am like part German, but it'll be spelled like SCHNUB, something along those lines. But regardless, that's not actually how it's spelled, but I don't mind so much. I'm not such a stickler for that kind of thing. It sounds the same, right? The meaning holds. I don't mind. But, I mean, case in point, when it comes to, like, Prior Mabel, I have very intentionally kept Prior Mabel's name, very nebulous, right? To where you can spell Prior Mabel's name in any way that you want, right? There's, like, a spelling that I prefer to use, but any is viable, right? Because so long as it phonetically looks like Prior Mabel when you read it in your head or aloud. But regardless, going back, that was it. Lyle Shnub in Morrowind. I ended up taking that name to RuneScape for quite some time when I got into RuneScape, which was not my first MMO. Before that, and before all this, I'd played Anarchy Online for a fair amount, but I hadn't yet come up with the name. In there, I used, I think I went with, I'm not even sure if I remember how to pronounce his name. Kiroro, something like that. The space frog, from the popular manga and anime, right? I was very much into that as a kid. I had a lot of the books. I think I still have them somewhere. I probably should get rid of them or something. Maybe I'll keep one of them. But I really loved that as a kid. I'd read them. I'd even let other kids like sort of look at them too. Because I was like, I was saving up to get these every time I would go out with relatives and all that, like my great aunt or whatever. I'd want to say, oh, let's go to the bookstore. I'll get a book. And I got one of those. And so in Anarchy Online, that was my username. But yeah, it wasn't until Morrowind and RuneScape that I really sort of got into it. And I just used it from there on out, right? From Morrowind to RuneScape to... I guess World of Warcraft maybe would have been the next big one. But truth be told, because Lyle is a real name, when I went to get started in World of Warcraft, the name Lyle was already taken. So, I was kind of at a standstill, and I ended up devising and using a lot of other alternative names, right? I used, like, for a dwarf character that I had... I saw, dwarves, they love KH in their name, so I went with Kazile. I went with, for a future Death Knight, I was like, oh, this guy's messed up. So let's put an X on there. Xyle. Whoa, sounds like xylophone. And, I also had, my first WoW character was sort of a mixture of my real first name, Frederick, and sort of my online moniker, my Saul Goodman, if you will. I sort of mixed the two of them together, so I ended up with Fryle, right? Which actually worked pretty well for a gnome mage. But like I said, the rest is history. Truth be told, I think also maybe ending up on a name like that was because originally, sort of in life, I didn't really like my own first name because Frederick felt so officious. It felt so like, I don't know. It felt so old, right? It felt so like vintage or whatever, right? Especially for a kid. And truth be told, maybe this is a story for another video. In fact, yeah, definitely. But, yeah, I didn't really care for my name, but nowadays I absolutely love it. I feel like it's incredibly fitting. And if anything, it having sort of like an older sort of more vintage flair to the name. I actually really like that now. So it's aged like fine wine for me. But nonetheless, very much enjoy as well the whole Lyle Shnub situation. You can find me pretty much anywhere under that name, going back almost 20 years, if not 20 years. Like I said, give or take, it'd be coming up pretty soon, I think, on the anniversary of that, I feel. I'm not sure, though. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's been basically my username everywhere. Any game, any sort of service, it's my go-to, for better or worse. I've said in the past that there are probably like old forums and stuff that you could do a name search and find me typing stuff up as a kid or whatever, as a child, or a teenager, even worse, and probably saying something really horrible and embarrassing, right? To which I say, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I was a literal child at the time. You know, that was the early access version of who I am today. But regardless, I think that about covers it for sort of the origin of my name, of my online name, my moniker, and whatnot. Apologies for folks who have been watching for some extended period of time and thought that this was just my real name. I'm sorry. It's not. It's never been. Anyway, thanks for watching. Until next time, please take care of each other.